First of all,
this is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
It might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
All right, welcome to the BS Report. Well, it looks like the Celtics are about to clinch home court advantage, not just for the Eastern Conference, but for the playoffs. And we've been waiting to do this for months and months, but my friend Sean Grande is the play-by-play guy for the radio broadcast for the Celtics, and he's been toiling in Lotteryville for the last few years, and now his hero, KG, has joined the Celtics and saved him and rejuvenated him professionally and as a person. So we had to have him on. Sean Grande, how are you?
Saved me. He saved you, my friend.
He saved us.
He saved everyone connected to the Boston Celtics.
Now, you were the TV guy in Minnesota for a few years, and you witnessed the power of KG firsthand. And as soon as the KG for Jefferson trade rumors started circulating, everybody was arguing about it. You were adamant that KG, nobody had any idea what he was capable of doing for the Celtics team, and you've been a little bit vindicated.
I'd say, yeah. That's been one of the fun parts and also the hardest part of this year for me because, the number one question you get, if you're me, all year is, boy, this must be fun for you. Boy, you must be having a great time. And the hardest part has not been to do that Michael Jordan, palms up after hitting the three, what else can I do, told you so thing about it. If you're a student of play-by-play history, everybody knows the famous Howard Cosell call, down goes Frazier.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it. And if you know the background of it and you know sort of the history of play-by-play, he wasn't calling the fight down goes Frazier, what a vicious knockout. He was saying, down goes Frazier, I told you so. I picked George Foreman. I was the only guy that told you George Foreman was going to win this fight. That's what was coming through in that call. And that's been the hardest part this year when all the experts and all the people like you who didn't want Al Jefferson traded, and it's been the most overlooked part really nationally. And even people in Boston have sort of conveniently forgotten it. But in Boston, in the month of June, the Boston Herald ran a poll. Said, would you trade Al Jefferson straight up for Kevin Garnett? And 82% of the people said no. Everyone was against it. Everyone.
I stand by my thoughts on that, regardless of how this season has turned out.
And I admire you for that, no matter how wrong you are, that you'll stand by.
Well, I don't think we would have had enough with just Pierce and Garnett. I think the Ray Allen component was the third piece, and I'm not sure that everybody is accepting a discount to join our bench throughout the season. I don't know if that happens if it's just Pierce and KG.
I think KG is a big part of the discount people are willing to accept. And, you get into that dicey part of history, what if. There still could have been a version of the Ray Allen deal. You never know. I mean, obviously there's different things that could have happened a bunch of different ways, but for the Celtics, there's no arguing it couldn't have happened. KG sort of balking at the initial deal.
Yep.
Was the best thing that could have happened. That Danny Ainge did a lot of things over the last few years to put himself in position to make this move, but you got to be lucky and you got to be good. And he put himself in the right spot, and then the chips fell at the right time.
I obviously would have traded Jefferson just for KG if you threw out the cap and all this stuff. But the trade that was discussed in June was Jefferson and the number 5 pick and all the other stuff we gave up just for KG. So they used that number 5 pick to get Allen.
Oh, come on. You would have gotten Trent Hassel, too. Don't forget that.
And when we got Trent Hassel. So I just don't think that trade puts us in the same place that we're in now. And as you said, it's fortunate that the events unfolded the way they did, and also that the underlooked thing in this whole thing is how Golden State almost got KG on draft day, and it's still unclear how that got screwed up. But that was probably a better trade for Minnesota, right?
I think it was. I think many of the trades, when they were first looking at it, the Boston deal that you're talking about that would not have helped the Celtics as much.
Yep.
In this original deal, that was the best deal at the time for Minnesota. That's why that's the one they wanted to make. And I think after the fact, you know how it works now. There's a lot of cover your tail going on around the league. After Kevin Garnett goes to Boston, everybody else has to say to their fans, oh, we had a much better deal. Danny Ainge and Kevin McHale had this backroom deal to save the Celtics. Everyone has to cover themselves because all of a sudden the other guy Boston's off to this historic season, and everybody else is the GM that didn't get Kevin Garnett when he was available. So history becomes blurred by everyone's, exaggerations of what they had offered or what they could have given to get him.
The only time that didn't hold true was when Memphis traded Pau Gasol inexplicably like 3 weeks before
that was
the
just
trade
the
deadline.
opposite.
Yeah, I was like, wait, what? Wait, I didn't get to make an offer. Now, you have an MVP vote.
Funny you should say that. It arrived in my mailbox about a half hour ago.
Okay, so first 2 months of the season pass, KG unanimous MVP, obviously. Then he gets hurt. Team does pretty well without him. Comes back, not the same kind of force from a statistical standpoint. And really, you can make a really strong case that Pierce has been the best player on the team for the last 3 months. With that said, it is most valuable, and I think we would all agree that none of this would be happening had KG not joined the team and changed the culture of what was going on in Boston as a basketball city, as a franchise, as a professional team, and everything else. Do you think he's the MVP?
I think it's a three-man race right now, and I'm really happy I don't have to vote today. I don't think it's going to be any easier in 2 weeks. And I'm always the last guy. The league's always, calling my phone and emailing me because I want to wait till every single game is in, and I wait till the last possible second,
right.
To get it in, hoping you'll sort of be hit with clarity and the right choice. I think it's a hard year for many of the awards. I think Rookie of the Year is tough. I think Coach of the Year is tough. But MVP to me is three guys, with Chris Paul and Kobe in there as well. It's like stocks. They keep going up and down. It's been interesting to me. I think that nationally, KG is looked at now as either one of four, as people throw LeBron in there, and I can't. How can you vote for a guy whose team has been outscored over 82 games playing in the Eastern Conference?
I agree with you.
LeBron to me may be the best. I think LeBron is the best of that second group that probably has Paul Pierce in there and maybe some of the others who you've thought about in snapshots throughout the season, whether that be Tracy McGrady, whether it be Paul Pierce. I mean, heck, you want to talk about it, why isn't Andre Miller, a second-tier MVP choice for the year he has had? So different.
He probably is now.
Yeah, I think he's in that group. When you have the All-NBA thing to look at, too, and you got to pick the top 15 guys, it helps you with MVP because it sort of narrows down. You have that third tier and the second tier and then the top tier. I think when people point at the numbers, I kind of laugh at that with Kevin Garnett because the single most significant number for the Celtics as a franchise going forward here over these next 2 months and what may be is the fact that this has been a 40-minute-a-game guy his entire career who has only had to play 33 minutes a game, which is remarkable. And all his numbers per minute project out the way they always have if he were playing 40 minutes. And here's an amazing number, too. In the 2004 year, in which obviously Minnesota went to the Western Conference Finals, and I always believe would have won had Sam Cassell been healthy in the conference finals and in the finals, Kevin Garnett played nearly 4,000 minutes by the time that season was over, start to finish, including the playoffs. He's going to go into the playoffs this year barely having played 2,000, which is, a huge thing as far as the Celtics are concerned, but it's hurt him in the MVP race. If you want to start with MVP as the best player on the best team, then you're starting with Kevin Garnett. He's the best player on the best team.
But the Pierce component, though, makes that a little difficult.
The way on many great teams, thinking about the 86 Mets with, they had Gary Carter and Keith Hernandez, who kind of split each other's votes. I think Mike Schmidt won the MVP that year. Things like that happen, and Chris Paul has a very special year. My point is that I don't know right now what I'm going to do, but I don't have a problem with any of those three guys winning. I think it's going to be fine. I didn't vote for Steve Nash either of the years that he won, and yet it was so close in those years. I think I voted for Shaq the first year, and I might have been Kobe 2 years ago. But
yeah, we usually see eye to eye on this stuff. I would put KG third because I just think Pierce has been phenomenal. And you've dealt with this too, and anybody who watches the Celtics has dealt with this. Like to watch Pierce for all these years and to see the potential of the player that he could be night to night, and then to actually see him hit that potential has probably been the best thing about this season, right?
It's been up there. That's a very long list.
Yeah, that's true.
That have been fun to watch, but absolutely, and to watch him play with joy again, and know that he got to do it. He gets to do the one thing that so many players don't get the chance to do, which is to do it. Even Kevin Garnett didn't get a chance to do it, which is win on the team that drafted you and to play for the team that you wanted to play for. This is what everybody wants when they eventually force these trades. People, last summer there was all this, well, Kevin Garnett doesn't want to go to Boston. He didn't, it wasn't that he wanted to go to L.A. He didn't want to leave Minnesota. He really wanted it to happen there. It took a long time to sink in that it wasn't going to happen there. You just get so immersed in it, in the organization that had been his only home in the NBA. And this is a guy who takes fierce loyalty to a new level. And it just took a long time for him to accept that it really was over in Minnesota. That's
an interesting point. And I've battled with this a little bit this season. And this isn't a negative point on the season in any respect, but this team we're watching this year has really no correlation to the last 5 Celtics teams I've watched. It's basically like we put together a fantasy team this year of really other than Pierce, and we watch Rondo for maybe he played 30 games last year, really for more than 10 minutes a game. And then everybody else has been a hired gun for the most part, except for Perk, who we got to watch kind of evolve from this guy who looked like he was just going to be a thug to somebody who's a decent starting center. But that has been a little strange for me. Like, I don't know if I have the same complete attachment to this team yet that I would have if it was, Jefferson and Antoine and guys that had been on this team forever. But at the same time, obviously it's worked out.
Don't think that 82% thing, that what you're saying didn't play into that. Because it did. Because that is the dream scenario, is that you get to watch your own guys grow into that championship. It just isn't the way it's going to work anymore. And I'll tell you this, it certainly is not the way it is going to work if you are drafting where Danny Ainge had been drafting for 4 years. You're not going to build a championship team drafting, getting Delonte West and Tony Allen at the 24th and 25th picks and having Al Jefferson fall to 15. These are lucky breaks. But remember, Danny Ainge wasn't drafting up high. The Celtics had to pay the price for 4 consecutive years of making the playoffs, and people thumb their nose at that. Well, if you don't win a championship, it doesn't mean anything. Well, that's nonsense. Making the playoffs matters. Having entertaining seasons matter. Having playoff series matter. I don't think you can suffer through what, I'm sitting here in Chicago right now, and the Bulls had to suffer through 6 empty, horrible winters that were seasons that were over by December, just to have the opportunity to get better, and now look at what's happened so quickly. So this is the way it happens. And if you're fortunate, you have 2 or 3 of your core players that you are attached to, and that you can enjoy watching them participate in the championship. But I think history will record. People are going 20 years from now when you're talking to your friends about the Celtics and this team. They're going to say, "Oh yeah, Eddie House, that was our guy, and James Posey, and remember those guys?" Because there are moments that haven't happened yet that are on the horizon in the next couple of months, whether it be a game-winning shot by Eddie House in the second round of the playoffs or James Posey taking a charge. There are moments that haven't happened yet. They're not a part of history that have, ingratiated these players into, Boston sports history. And
we've had maybe 10 of those games this season.
Yeah, there've been a few. And you know what? That hurts Kevin Garnett's MVP chances too, is the fact that you're not thinking of memorable games that he's taken over, although the best games he's had in the second half of the year have been the really big games, the games in Texas, the home game against Detroit that clinched the tiebreaker for the Celtics against the Pistons. He's had huge games in the games that have mattered, but the Celtics are having this historic season of blowing people out. They have a chance. This is having a double-digit positive scoring differential for a season has only happened 3 times in the last 35 years in the NBA, all by the Jordan Bulls. And so the Celtics don't have these great memories of all these games during the season because they're up by 20 in the fourth quarter a lot of nights.
Right, and with the Jordan Bulls, wasn't that the 96, 97, and what was the third team, 92?
Yes.
And then 2 of those teams, that was probably the weakest year competitively for the league. I think the fact that the Celtics are doing it this way this season with the amount of good teams that are in the league this year and the amount of talent overall is kind of amazing.
Yeah, and you can't, you can play this East-West card, and I hate this 16-team playoff seeding overreaction. Roger Maris hit 61 home runs, so let's raise the mound conversation. But the Celtics,
wait a second. Hold on.
You're so easy to fish you in. It's so easy. Go on. Try to convince me that people want to see the Celtics, play whoever, that you want to watch Toronto and Utah in the first round.
Yes. It's not an overreaction.
It is an overreaction.
It's not an overreaction.
It is an overreaction. First of all, if you were to do the 16 teams this year, and don't sell me on Portland right now because everyone knows they've been terrible the last 2 months, 7 of the top 16 teams are in the East right now. You'd have the 9th team in the West. Portland would not beat Toronto or Philadelphia in a 7-game series right now, so it'd be 7 in the East.
You're missing the
West.
point. It's all about the bracket. It's all about the office pool. I want to fill out an NBA office pool for the playoffs.
Yeah, of course you do.
I like to gamble, and that's something that I would want to gamble on. Why can't I have that?
Because it doesn't. You want to see. No. Why are people in such a hurry to change something that works? You're going to be immersed.
Hold on,
in the
it does not work.
In 3 weeks, you're going to be immersed in the Western Conference playoffs, and you're going to forget this entire conversation because you're going to be watching Utah, New Orleans, or Phoenix play San Antonio in the first round, and you're not going to think twice about the stuff.
8 of the last 10 years, it did not work. So you can't tell me it works. Like that, your 20% success rate is not working.
On what? What is working? What is your definition of working?
My working is that the playoffs should build, and by the 3rd and 4th rounds, we should at least have 3 or 4 of the best teams in that 3rd round.
You know that's what you're going to have. Because
we're going to have it this year.
Yes, you are, because Boston and Detroit are not only the 2 best teams in the East, they're the 2 best teams in the NBA.
They're
going to play in the
you.
Eastern Conference Finals, and the Western Conference Final is going to be, who knows? Because who knows who the 2 best teams are.
I agree with you. This year, the playoffs are going to work, and I don't really care that, whoever, Denver or Dallas, isn't going to make the playoffs because neither of those teams are going to do anything anyway, especially if you watched Denver last night.
Yeah,
blow a 20-point lead.
You know what? In Denver, you just can't be a serious team. You look at the number of beatings that Denver has taken this year, and it's the exact opposite of why this has been a historic Celtics season, is that they've been in, with the exception of the Utah game a couple of weeks ago that they played at home, the Celtics have been in, had a chance to win with 4 minutes to go every single game they've been in all year. And Denver just has too many nights.
Well, though,
get blown out.
Even that Utah game, I felt like we were going to win that one. There was like 6 minutes left. Even though we were down like 6 or 8, I remember thinking we're going to make a run. We have not gone into the 4th quarter of a game this season and not had a chance to win.
That is correct. And you have two double-digit losses right now. Everybody else in the NBA has 8, and 2 is the record. That would match the NBA record if the Celtics go through these final 9 games and don't lose again by double digits. Based on the schedule, it's very possible that will match an NBA all-time record.
Well, that brings me to my next question. Does the Celtics team have an extra gear? Does it need an extra gear?
I don't know if it needs an extra gear. Obviously, this has been good enough to dominate, to beat everybody there is. That's going to be the pressure when this thing goes back to 0-0 for the Celtics, as it will in 2 weeks. You're going to get everybody out of the woodwork and all the old columns about Kevin Garnett and Doc Rivers not having won a playoff series. And
who?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, we haven't heard the magic name yet here in one of the greatest seasons ever put forth by an NBA team. His coach has gone. The coach has gone unmentioned by you.
He hasn't gone unmentioned. Tom Thibodeau's done a great job this year.
Oh my God! You know what? All the people like you who say that Doc Rivers, he won the lottery this year with this team he's coaching.
He did.
And they point at Tom Thibodeau, who obviously has had a great track record and has had success everywhere he has gone. If any coach has won the lottery, if Tom Thibodeau is going to get credit for the defense on this team, the best defensive team in the league, and you're saying Doc Rivers has won the lottery. Tom Thibodeau got the greatest defensive player of one of the greatest defensive players of this generation of the NBA. How is that not winning the lottery as a defensive coach?
It's a very fair point, but the fact remains that Doc's big deficiency was that this team didn't play defense, and they went out and got the best defensive assistant in the league.
They got the best defensive player in the league,
and the best defensive player in the league,
and that's fine. I'm not I'm not subtracting anything from Tom Thibodeau. I'm just saying. So obviously, Doc Rivers is not getting your coach of the year vote. Is that what you're saying?
Here's the thing: if this were football, and we've seen this happen every year in football, and a team goes from not playing defense to playing really good defense.
Yeah, the coordinator would get a head coach.
They go nuts. Steve Spagnuolo, oh my God, what team is he going to coach? This guy's brilliant. Look at the schemes. In basketball, it's like the assistant coaches don't matter.
Are you saying
they're not mentioned?
Are you comparing the impact of a defensive coordinator in the National Football League to an assistant coach on an NBA team? This isn't even college basketball. This is the pros.
I am, in this particular case, I am comparing it to an NFL team, the impact that Thibodeau's had in their defense, and KG obviously as well. But, in 3 years of watching the Doc Rivers teams before KG got there, we never defended a high screen once. And now we defend them better than anybody in the league. And you can't tell me that's just because he figured out how to do it.
You are of the belief that Doc Rivers' team somehow underachieved over the last few years, and
I am. When we've argued about that ad nauseum, I firmly believe that.
Well, thankfully, the rest of the country now gets to be ad nauseated.
Listen, whatever happened this year doesn't change what I watched the last 3 years. You can't say it did. We lost 18 games in a row last year.
And whatever you think about, it's the ability. It's like going to a movie. If you've made up your mind that the movie's not going to be any good, you will not be convinced by what is on the screen. Your mind is not going to be changed. So,
do I think he's improved? Yes. Do I think he's better than he was 3 years ago? Yes, I do. I mean, he murdered the Indiana series in 2005.
Which is what everybody will kill him for, and everyone forgets. Somehow the Celtics were supposed to win that series, even though the Pacers were one of the best teams in the NBA that year, and the only reason they were in that seed is because of the brawl at the Palace. And they lost all the players.
Jermaine O'Neal had one shoulder that worked, and Ron Artest wasn't on the team. That wasn't one of the best teams in the world.
Well, maybe Jermaine O'Neal will come back here in these last few games. He played last night. He's going to play in Boston tomorrow night. Pacers will get the 8th seed, and you can have the big Pacer rematch with Jermaine O'Neal.
I would love that. I'd love to have Obi and Jermaine O'Neal. I'd actually like that rematch just because it would be so much fun to root against the Pacers.
I mean, it's nothing against the Pacers. It's just that the Celtics, everyone around the organization pretty much feels like we have seen everything there is to see in the city of Indianapolis, having gone there in the playoffs the last 3 times.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So give me your 3 ideal 8th seed locations for you and Max, your partner Cedric Maxwell, for you guys to go to.
Well, I could tell you that it's been all location for Max. That's all he's doing. He doesn't scout tapes of games to look at. He's just scouting hotels and different cities and different things to do. I think Max would be Atlanta. Mine, I'm sitting here in Chicago right now. That certainly would have been my choice. And, if the Nets are in there, you get a few extra days in New York.
Well, Chicago's not going to be in there.
No, they're not. They're 4.5 out. And the Celtics, interestingly enough, are going to have a chance to sort of put the cigarette butt out for some teams here the next couple of nights. They can sort of finish off the Bulls tonight. They can take a big chunk out of the Pacers tomorrow. I think the Hawks are in real good shape. They've had a favorable enough schedule. It's funny. I think in some ways they've sort of had a disappointing year, given the fact that they've had Mike Bibby for this, entire last third of the season. They played Anthony Johnson, a veteran at the point, which is very smart about Mike Woodson, because the front office was in such disarray. There was nobody above him to tell him you have to play the kids to develop the young players, and he just went on his own, figured out the best way to win games. I thought at the beginning of the year Atlanta would be a 36, 37-win team, which would not be good enough to make the playoffs in the East. As a result, they're going to win that same number of games, and they'll make the playoffs because Chicago and New Jersey and Miami have been, so dramatically underachieving.
It's a shame.
I think it's good for the league. It's good for Atlanta to have them in because they haven't been in. I think it'll mean more to them.
Yeah, but it's a shame that the situation with the front office and the coach wasn't better, because they've tried to fire this guy like 3 times during the season.
Yeah.
And, that, from a talent standpoint, I don't think they'd beat the Celtics, but at least that would be an interesting series, especially if more than 5,000 people showed up for a Hawks game in Atlanta. And they have young legs and they can make threes, and you just never know.
Yeah, there's a scenario, too, by which they got a couple of games with Philadelphia, and if they could beat them twice, it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. I don't think it'll happen. The Philadelphia could fall to 8, and obviously the Sixers have played that last game beating the Celtics, and they're fun to watch, and they've got a big physical point guard, which caused the Celtics problems. But right now, the way the Celtics are playing, a month from now is a month from now. And when LeBron James gets to Boston in a month, and maybe that Cleveland team is in better shape, and maybe they're more comfortable with their rotations, and maybe Ben Wallace is healthier. But right now, as much fear as Cleveland strikes into the naturally pessimistic, sky is falling heart and DNA makeup of Boston fans, I don't think that Cleveland gets more than a game against the Celtics the way things are right now. So a month from now is a month from now. But right now, I don't see anybody. I think that, Cleveland could be vulnerable in the first round. That, if Toronto, if Bosh is completely healthy, Washington gets Arenas back, Philadelphia is dangerous. Cleveland's got their hands full in the first round.
I agree. We talked like a month ago, and I was saying how terrified I was of Cleveland. But the more I'm watching them,
and then you watch them, and you're like, why? Yeah. And everyone, and it's fair to be terrified because everyone has the memory. What's popping into your head when you say, as a Celtic fan, you're terrified of Cleveland, is sitting wherever you were sitting last May when LeBron single-handedly beat Detroit.
Right.
So that's what you're flashing back to. But the team around him is not playing nearly as well as they were, last May.
And the Celtics are much better than the 07 Pistons. I don't think that's a contest.
They certainly are right now. As I said,
I'm going to throw one thing at you here.
Throw it.
If Philly goes 7 and they play Detroit, I feel like Detroit is a lot more vulnerable than people think because they have that on-off switch. I'm not sold on the whole Flip Saunders and the team getting along, especially Rasheed Wallace. I mean, that's destined to self-combust. And I should just say combust, right? It's destined to combust, not self-combust.
The seeds of that are there.
Yeah, the seeds are there. And, it's precisely the type of series where they could not take them seriously for one of the first two games, go back to Philly. The crowd's totally into it for the first time in however many years. Philly steals those games 3 and 4, and then all of a sudden they're down 3-1, go back to Detroit for game 5. I could see that happening.
It's not crazy. I tend to believe in Detroit. I do think it is. I think Flip Saunders is very keenly aware of the vulnerability that we are discussing, and thus, I think they'll be on top of it. I'm not overly concerned because of Chauncey Billups in that spot against Andre Miller. I don't think that's a guy that Andre Miller can push around.
Oh, wait, I forgot that you worked with Flip back in Minnesota, so he's another coach that you have to defend.
You know what? This is, you have this perfect, it's like arguing with a Freudian. Whenever you argue with a Freudian about something,
I forgot,
you're blocking. So you
I'm sorry,
have
I forgot.
a conversation. You very cleverly, you figured out how to make the Doc Rivers case, which is anyone that defends Doc Rivers from a basketball perspective points to the fact that this is one of the most successful NBA teams in the last 35 years. There's always other things to point to, and someone defends basketball-wise why Doc Rivers has done a good job. You simply say, well, you like Doc Rivers. You've been charmed by Doc Rivers. He's your friend.
It's all true.
So magically, everything I know about basketball in the 10 years I've been in the league is vapidly. He's got one of those Will Smith, Tommy Lee Jones guns, and just points it at my head. And everything you know about the NBA, you just forget it when he wants, because he's got such a charming smile. He's so disarming.
He's your buddy.
You just suddenly forget everything that happened.
Let me ask you this: is Casey Jones a good coach?
I never worked with Casey Jones, so.
Did you think he was a good coach as a basketball fan?
I think as a kid, as we both were at the time watching Casey Jones, you think what you're trained to think. But I think this is a players' league.
Yes.
I think the players determine whether you win or lose. I think when Doc Rivers had the youngest team in the NBA, he lost games. And when he's got the best team in the NBA, he wins games, which is what you are supposed to do. As Paul Pierce said about the game against Miami the other night, that's what's supposed to happen.
All right, I will concede this point. Doc did a poor job in the 2005 playoffs. He did not do a very good job coaching a team of young players, and he hasn't screwed up this season. He's actually done a pretty good job with help from Tom Thibodeau.
Wow, that's
Is that
the
fair?
single highest praise. I think, you were on our show in November, and I made you say, I think, it's on tape. Bill Simmons saying, I think Doc is doing
My dad was there. I felt bad. Well, we'll see, though. We'll see in the playoffs, though.
You must have just been charmed by me and Cedric Maxwell. That's what it was, and you forgot everything you know about basketball. Cause that's what happened.
Maxwell's another story because, you really got to put a cork in the bottle here with his ridiculous Bird KG thing that he keeps perpetuating.
Well, there's a reason for everything. And
I know.
Most notably, there's sports radio reasons, there's being provocative reasons, and there are people who say things that even though they aren't true, you can make a point. And just to get people thinking, there's something I've been doing one of those lately about people who say, well, the Celtics are gambling everything. You're making the case earlier about you're sort of rooting for laundry, and these are all new players. And the other side of that case is, well, you're gambling everything now on these 3 years, and then you're going to be the Miami Heat. When people don't realize that's not how it has to work in the NBA. And then in 3 years, so I've been doing this bit pointing out that in 3 years, if the Celtics manage their cap right, when Ray Allen comes off the cap in 2010, comes off the salary, why couldn't you make a call to LeBron James when he's a free agent to fill that $20 million slot? Now, it's an absurd thing. We all know where LeBron's going to end up going. But it makes you realize, it just puts the seed in people's heads and makes them, even though you don't really think LeBron James will be a Celtic, although be an interesting phone call. How'd you like to come play with Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce in Boston and win a championship?
And he'd say, I can't. I already committed to Jay-Z in 2005.
But it makes people think. Obviously, we know it's not going to happen, just as I think Max knows that, Larry Bird is Larry Bird. He's making the point to get people to think that Larry Bird had Hall of Fame players around him, that everyone has a perspective. Everything is a situation. And
that's all fine. But Max does have an axe to grind because Larry Bird was in the office when Bill Walton called Red Auerbach and asked to play for him, and Larry Bird said, go do it, and they traded Maxwell for Bill Walton. So
but go back 5 years. Go back before that, 6 years, when Larry Bird was a rookie, and you are the guy who has been the leading scorer on the Boston Celtics, a bad Celtics team. And all of a sudden, here comes Larry Bird. He's going to take your spot offensively, and since he can't guard anybody, you're now going to guard the best guy on the other team. and then Larry Bird wins All Defensive Player. He's on the All Defensive team.
Larry was good.
Everybody's got a unique perspective on that, and
sure.
It happened very early. I think that, if you thought I had a man crush on Kevin Garnett when I was sort of the lone voice in Boston last spring, sort of talking about this as something that could happen and how amazing it would be if it did happen, it didn't take Max very long to jump. And Boston, as you know, is a town that very much embraces its heritage, is slow to adapt to change, and as a result, the discussions of Larry Bird or Bill Russell coming so fast after Kevin Garnett came to town really pushed some people the wrong way. I think there are still people that hold some resentment, strange as it may seem, towards KG about comparisons that other people were making about, Larry Bird or even Bill Russell, which I think the Bill Russell one is actually a more accurate.
It's a better one.
It's a better umbrella under which to put Kevin Garnett. Dominating defensively, and there are elements of his game, but I think the bottom line argument that Max would make, and that if you wanted to make the Garnett-Bird case, is that Kevin Garnett is is better than Larry Bird defensively by a greater margin than Larry Bird was better than KG offensively.
But you have to factor in the last, his performance in crunch time, which we've seen a couple of times.
Well, how much crunch time is there? And again, better cast around. It's the old.
Yeah.
You know what? I think it'll be a better conversation to have about Kevin Garnett in 2 months.
I'll tell you, out of all the great subplots that we have heading into these playoffs, I think the KG one is the most interesting because, as we discussed a few weeks ago, what was the game when KG just stunk in the last 2 minutes? It was like 3 weeks ago. I can't even remember. But it happened for like the third time, and we were talking about this is a guy that really hasn't played that many big games, which is weird because he's 31. He's made more money than almost anybody ever in the history of the sport, and yet. He's played one second-round series. He never played in college. He never played any big games there. He was on a bunch of mediocre to half-decent T-Wolves teams. And you could make a case that he just gets too hyped up for these big games.
You could make a case that he is insane and gets too hyped up to play a game of Go Fish. I mean, That's just his personality. That's the way it is. I think that you are shaped by the things that happen in your career in the playoffs, and whether it be, Charles Barkley or Karl Malone, people will tend to find more flaws in their game because they didn't win. And I think snapshots happen. You immediately, whenever someone says Doc Rivers, you're going to have a flashcard to the 2005 playoffs in your mind. You can't help it. Your mind goes there.
Exactly.
With Kevin Garnett, I was there. It was in San Antonio. It was the first game of the playoffs in '99. He twice gave up shots in the fourth quarter against double teams and triple teams to pass to Dean Garrett, who was open at the free throw line. Dean Garrett, one of many, a proud tradition of Minnesota centers to play with Kevin Garnett. It's like the New York Mets third baseman list for the first 30 years of their franchise. They had like 80 different guys playing third. At that moment, it became Kevin Garnett doesn't want to take the big shot because he passed out of double teams and made the right basketball play. And it has always stuck with him. And those who choose to find fault in Kevin Garnett will always go there. And whether or not we're going to be having this conversation again in 2 months, we don't know. But how many legitimate chances has he had to win? They had a chance in 2004. They had significant injuries in the conference finals. They rolled the dice. Minnesota did. It's what you had to do. And we'll find out.
Well, the timing of this part of the discussion is good because of C-Webb, the way he just retired. And, his legacy is the guy who never got the most out of his ability. But, if Peja makes that three in the corner in Game 7,
yes,
they win the title that year, and C-Webb becomes the best guy on a team that won the title, and he's remembered completely differently.
Yeah, Robert Horry doesn't make the shit,
Yeah, I mean, it really, a basketball career, I've written about this a few times, but there really are some points where you have these forks and it can go either way. I feel like out of anybody who's heading into these playoffs, with the possible exception of Kobe, KG has the most at stake, especially if they end up playing San Antonio in the finals, and it's going to be this KG versus Duncan, World War III, overly promoted. That's going to be the storyline. And, I wonder how he's going to respond. I wonder if he's going to get too hyped up. I just don't know.
He does have that with one asterisk, which is that this is not the 04 Lakers, the Karl Malone, Gary Payton. This isn't a one-shot deal. This is a 2-3 year window for the Celtics and not one. And I think if you pay attention to sports history, and particularly NBA history, it would hardly be something that's always been in the back of my mind as this has been going on. There is something almost poetic and natural about teams that have this kind of year the Celtics have had somehow fall short in the playoffs. And then maybe next year they don't have the same regular season. They're not going to win 65 games in the regular season next year, but maybe next year is their year in the playoffs, particularly when at the beginning of the year when I was asked about this team, the reason I liked the Celtics better in 2009 than 2008, 4 months ago, is that I loved Rajon Rondo at the end of his third year a lot more than I liked him at the beginning of his second. Now,
yeah, you and I were both on that bandwagon because
Yeah.
not only Rondo in his third year, but also you get the first-round pick who might be able to play, and you get the full free agent mid-level
the full
exception.
year of being the team that everybody wants to come. When we saw what happened, the Celtics, they got James Posey and they got Eddie House, but the free agency period was over. It was a strange time for the Kevin Garnett deal to happen because when it happened in August, most of the free agents had already signed, and it wasn't a great free agent year anyway.
Yeah.
And the funniest part was the schedule. The NBA had already made the schedule, so TNT and ESPN and ABC didn't get their full shot at the Celtics, who obviously will be playing on Christmas Day and New Year's Day and every other holiday there is next year once the league gets a hold of the schedule.
I've changed my tune on that, though. I went from thinking that 2009 would be a better chance to thinking that now it would be a disappointment if they didn't win.
Disappointment is you got to step back for 1 second.
No, I'm not saying obviously it's great to be relevant again.
Team. The Celtics are the best team.
They have the best team and they should win the finals. They should.
And the best team should win. That said, there are 4 or 5. Do I think they have a better than 50% chance to win? No, because I think there are 4 or 5 teams that have a chance to win. I think that the 2008-2009 thing has changed in my mind as it has gone along because I didn't think as the year went on, I thought they'd have a great regular season record. I didn't see them consistently over and over again beating the top teams in the NBA, nor did I see Rondo being ready to play at the level he is.
And he's tough too. That's the amazing thing about Rondo this year that none of us, I don't think, really knew is that this guy, he'll actually stand up for himself, and he's got a little feistiness to him that I always compared him to the way he played. I always thought he played like he was a deaf mute, like he never said a word, he never really talked or interacted with anybody.
That plays to his advantage. I mean, because he's so even keel. But winning the championship, I think if you are a Celtics fan, or you can appreciate how many people outside of Boston right now hate the city of Boston because of all the success that teams are having. You have to understand this represents a pipe dream for everybody about how fast it can turn around. That 1 year ago, everybody who's listening on ESPN.com right now, if you're a Celtics fan, last year you were in that, you're 2 clicks away from that draft simulator where you would, over and over again, people would sit in their cubes at work and just
10 months ago,
right, and just punch that draft simulator because all of Celtics Nation a year ago was pining for a 1 in 4 chance to win the lottery. Now, a year later, you have better than a 1 in 4 chance to win the championship.
And as you mentioned, it's a team that's not set up just for this year, next year, but because of
absolutely,
they really did a shrewd thing with the way they set up the extensions. And Allen's 2010, Pierce is 2011, KG is 2012.
The Celtics are the Celtics again.
Yeah.
And it's going to be that way for a while because even if you're not a championship contender, and the Celtics very well could be in 2011 and 2012, there's going to be that carryover effect from this 2 or 3 year run of ABC and TNT and being a part of the NBA culture again. I've written a lot about that this year, that the NBA and your beloved English League soccer, you had the league and you had the relegation pool.
Yeah.
The NBA is the same way. There's the NBA and there's the relegation pool, and you don't realize you're in it until you get back out of it. And the Celtics have been in that relegation pool for years.
You got a taste of that on Sunday when maybe the worst lineup ever trotted out in the history of the Fleet Center of the Boston Garden showed up in Boston. What was it? Earl Barron, Mark Blount, Chris Quinn,
Ricky Davis, and Kasib Powell, who made the mistake of having a decent game, so he got cut. That's what Miami's been doing. Bobby Jones from Washington was their leading scorer the other night, and they cut him because they're like, "Whoa, son, you're not getting this."
Do you think it would be suspicious if they signed a guy with one hand?
Not at this point. I don't think anybody would notice. But Blake Ahern was re-signed to another 10-day. So, all's right with the world. Yeah, Miami brings to mind the great question that Max and I again argue about all the time, which is, do you make that trade? Do you make the Faustian bargain? Do you win the championship if this is what it means?
I think you do.
I do too. Absolutely, all day and tomorrow.
But here's the thing. If they hadn't, if the refs don't turn game 3 around and Dallas doesn't fold like an accordion in the next 3 games, they lose that finals, and now they are where they are. And that stinks.
No question.
Yeah.
No question.
That wouldn't be good.
Dallas is playing into the this Boston thing, too, in that you are much more conscious of where your wallet is the day after it gets stolen. And what happened to Dallas last year, I think it's playing in the mind of the Celtics all year with their record and their sort of intensity level. I don't think you're going to see something like that happen again for a while in the NBA.
So where are you on June 11th, 2008? What 2 teams are you watching? Are you at home or are you at one of the games?
You know what? I really tend to think the Celtic-Pistons series is going to live up to the hopes. I think there are scenarios by which, if you want to conjure up, as I said, people can conjure up LeBron as trouble for the Celtics in the second round. You can do any such thing with Philadelphia or whoever is in the 7th spot for Detroit. But I really think this is not only what's going to happen, it's what should happen. It's what everybody wants to have happen. It harkens back to the Celtics and Sixers, back in the early 80s when you had the 2 best teams in the conference. I think the winner of that series, this is something I've recently changed my mind on, which is I now do believe that the winner of the Celtic-Pistons series wins the championship.
Wow.
Yeah. I was not until
the Spurs,
until the sweep through Texas. Yeah, it's all I think what happens when you're watching a team is that you tend to see their flaws. I think that you tend to see the flaws of your spouse more than other people do, which is possibly why
my spouse has no flaws. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, that would explain why you're the guy who still has one. But nevertheless, you when you're up close and personal, you tend to see the little things that go. You can find a lot of people in Minnesota who could find flaws in the game of Kevin Garnett more than people can nationally.
Yeah.
It just comes from watching someone over and over. And I think you tend to pick apart the team that you watch and see the flaws, and then you realize when you go around, and this is a team that's beating everybody else up, and that the Celtics really are the best team. And these teams in the West are really good teams, but I think the Spurs could win the championship, but I think this is probably the worst San Antonio team. That's saying something about how dominant that franchise has been.
Right.
It's really just, I don't think people don't realize last year that while Dallas had the best record and Dirk won the MVP, the Spurs had a significantly better scoring differential throughout the course of the year.
The Spurs were really good last year.
They were really, really good last year.
And they definitely got old at a couple spots, but they're
older now.
But you have to factor in the fact that Manu has gone to another level, I think.
Yeah, he has. He's really tough. But again, you look at individual matchups to the Celtics, I think if you're a really hardcore NBA person and you're wondering about the Celtics, the big issue right now with the Celtics would be Tony Allen, who they're going to need, whether it be against a Ginobili or a LeBron James, or they're going to need more significant minutes from him. So there's your Achilles heel on April 1st or something that may not matter until June 1st. I tend to like the Spurs and the Lakers a little bit. The Hornets, to me, are, how you'll see a movie or a show or something, and you'll see a hot girl, and you jump, and you're right away. Nobody else has seen her yet. She's not the it girl yet, and you're like, wow, check her out. She is unbelievable. So watching the Hornets play the first week of the season, I had a conversation with a couple of people in the Celtics, including Doc Rivers. I said, did you see the Hornets play? This is in the back room. Did you see the Hornets play last night? I think it was the Lakers, the first week of the season. That's a serious team. And now you're on them all year long. You're like, see, I told you so. I told you that girl was hot. But
so you're saying the Hornets
everybody else jumps on the bandwagon, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, it's not. This isn't the second coming. I don't think the Hornets get anywhere near the conference finals. I will not be surprised if they lose in the first round. The Rockets aren't going to be there. I love Utah's team, but they can't win on the road.
Wait. So you're saying the Hornets are like Joan Severance and no holds barred?
Possibly, yeah. I was trying to think of different. See, in my case, I don't particularly see. Particularly, one of the things we'll always have between us is you had the opportunity to introduce me to Sarah Silverman and never followed through in that. I was on her 15 years ago. The first time I saw her, I spotted Sarah Silverman, and that was mine. But I'm a bad example because I tend to maintain these ridiculous KG fierce loyalties that go on.
If there's a Celtics-Lakers finals, I'll introduce you.
Okay, I'm writing that down.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think that's hardly out of the question. Where's Bynum? All those teams in the West have one of those significant questions, certainly.
Well, I worry about the Lakers because if they can get out of round one, which I think is going to be the toughest round for them because they'll be working everybody back, the longer those playoffs go on and Kobe gets in a groove and Bynum gets back and they learn how to, that's a team that has the highest ceiling.
It is. There's no question. The problem with the West right now is that with the East, we've already done this. In the last 20 minutes, you and I have entirely visualized, and anyone who's taken the time to click on this button and listen for 40 minutes has clearly taken the time and can visualize how the Celtics and Pistons are going to get to the conference finals. But the problem with the West is, and the beauty of the West, is that we just don't have any idea what the first-round matchups are going to be. So you can't really, you can say, boy, the Lakers and Phoenix, that'll be a great series when it happens, or boy, New Orleans could beat this team, but they're not going to beat Utah. You can do that, but you don't have any idea, and you may not until the last couple of nights of the season, which way it's, which
There's
way
a couple of variables. Can Utah get home court advantage in round one? I think is a big one. Who gets to play Houston?
Yes.
In that 3 seed, I think is a big one because Houston's not going to beat anybody in the top 3. And then who draws the Golden State Russian roulette bullet? Not that you're going to lose to them, but they're scary, and it's going to be a tough series, an emotional series. And
that crowd, that is the most underrated crowd. And
well, I have bad news for you.
To play in the league in Oakland.
I have bad news for you. They did the wave during Sunday night's game. Yeah. I wrote last week in a column that I was worried about the Warriors, their fans this year, because it seemed like the crowd wasn't as good. Like maybe a lot of people had jumped on the bandwagon, and we've seen that happen in Boston too. And then when they did the wave on Sunday, I mean, that does not happen a year ago. There's no way.
Well, say this. Maybe it's so retro that it's back in.
I don't think so.
Yeah, maybe not.
They're getting like a lot of kids. They're getting a lot of business suits, and I remember when that happened in Boston, early 90s, and it was a disaster. But now it seems like, how would you say the home crowd is for these Celtic games?
It's changed. It's become the Celtics are the hot new restaurant.
Yeah,
in town. And
that's not a good thing.
It's not a good thing because what happens is people come and they don't really know how to react, and if the Celtics aren't up by 20 in the second quarter, they wonder what's wrong. Every team now has a way they go about their games with their game operations, and when they play certain things in commercial breaks, and when you play the kiss cam, and the Celtics have they've replaced Red Auerbach's cigar with this American Bandstand clip, and people react. They know how to react when a certain dance of this icon of the 70s who just looks the way people looked in the 70s comes on the screen. Everybody goes nuts, and Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce and everybody have adopted it, and when games are over, they play that. Well, sometimes fans don't know how to react to that because they haven't read about that in whatever She magazine tells them where to go to be seen. And it's becoming a little bit of that again, but you gotta.
Here's my prediction for you. They did something the last 2 years. My dad just found about it this year, but you can actually sell your regular season tickets just back on the website, and somebody else can snap them up. And I think what a lot of the diehard regular season people have done is they just pick their 10 or 12 or 15 games they're going to go to, get rid of the rest, and then they're going to be at all the playoff games. So I think the playoff crowds are going to be good.
Yeah,
at least
it
that's
will.
my
And it'll
hope.
be in town, in the city of Boston, it's going to be immense because the only other run the Celtics made in 2002, which came out of the blue. No one was expecting it, so there was no anticipation for it. In fact, they weren't even supposed to win in the first round that year because Philadelphia was the defending conference champions. It was a surprise run, whereas now everyone's excited, people are planning, and there's a legitimate it's not a pipe dream to think of the Celtics in the NBA Finals, as absurd as that statement would be a year ago.
It's big because I got clearance to come back for basically every home game starting in round 2.
That's immense. So
I'll be back, and if my marriage falls apart, so be it. This is only going to happen once in a lifetime, I don't. It's actually hard for me to fathom that this is happening. I have to be honest. We've watched so many playoffs in a row, and even as you said in 2002. When that happened, it was such an ugly Celtics team that year to watch, and we were winning games 66-64, and I don't think anybody really thought that was a potential champion. This is just unheard of. I don't know how to react. I really don't.
I don't think a lot of people do, and it's that relegation pool thing that I was talking about. It's been so long. I think part of the reticence to embrace the concept of Kevin Garnett coming here in the first place, and that poll I talked about at the beginning was people, not appreciating, how great Kevin Garnett was because Boston had been so out of the loop in the NBA. People weren't really hardcore NBA fans. And number two, just the idea that it wasn't real. It was just a pipe dream. It couldn't possibly happen. It was, you've been crying wolf for so many years about big players the Celtics could have acquired. Carlos Boozer, Allen Iverson, all these rumored deals that never happened. It just didn't seem like it was real. And I think a lot of that is strange. And I think people are trying to find the Celtics on TNT. I think that's strange to hear, Marv Albert and Kevin Harlan doing games, and to turn on ABC on Sunday afternoon and see the Celtics on there. It all has been this strange thing that also people haven't fully appreciated, because the Red Sox have done the impossible twice, and the Patriots came within 6 inches of having the greatest season in the history of professional sports. So you're also a little numb from that.
And as you said, there's a little bit of the keeping the guard up thing because of what happened at Dallas last year.
Sure.
If that hadn't happened, I think people would be maybe optimistic.
And the Patriots do, and that people don't want the season ruined. They don't want to invest after they invested everything emotionally, just convinced that the Patriots are going to win, and took out second mortgages on their houses, and it's such a great time to do that, to go take trips to Arizona to be there for this perfect season that you don't want to get burned again too. But I think once they start rolling and they win in the first round and it becomes what the town is about again, it's such a different, it's like eating the same thing over and over again. Red Sox, Patriots, Red Sox, Patriots, Red Sox, Patriots. Celtics is like, it just tastes different on your palate. And we saw that even in the playoffs, that first-round series, the 7-game series 3 years ago. There was an extra amount of interest in that because it was just something different.
Do you think the Patriots' loss has potentially reverted Boston back to that mode where they're worried that something
waiting
bad's
for the other
happen?
shoe
to
drop? I don't think that's ever far, as I said, from the DNA and the
it's just in there.
Genetics.
I have to say, though, I didn't see the Super Bowl coming, and I have about 10 podcasts in my archives. My dad was there. We were going to watch 60th birthday present. We were going to watch him go 19-0. And after that, I will never, ever, ever let my guard down with the sports team again.
Oh,
that was like walking in on your...
You say that, but you will. My only regret is that when you come back, my only regret is that Gus Johnson can't call these games for you.
Oh, stop it. That Super Bowl was like walking in on your girlfriend in college while she's having an orgy with like the entire baseball team. That's what that was like. I mean, it goes well beyond never letting it. In fact, I have a terrible beard right now. I didn't even tell you that. I have a horrible beard. I have a hand that rocks the cradle dad beard.
Yeah.
Going that if people saw it, they would just be universally appalled. And I've just been down in the dumps.
Well, you also, in the video game era, everyone has become accustomed to when Tyree makes that catch, you're looking for the reset button.
Yeah.
You've played this whole season on Madden 2000 or whatever, and you've set up this whole season to get yourself to the championship game, and you've won it, and now you're going to win this perfect season because this is what you've been working for the last couple of months on your Madden game on, and then this play happens, and you just hit the reset button because this isn't supposed to happen. This isn't right. It's like when Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson, Don King wanted to jump in the ring and yell, cut.
And then immediately after that, the whole Spygate thing goes to another level, and I have to be honest, it hasn't really been fun to think about the Patriots or think about the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'd be 100 times more excited for this draft, but I feel like I need like a few more months to recover. Like I almost wish the season wasn't starting for like another year.
Well, that's the beauty of having other things and having the Red Sox start and having the Celtics and having the seasons change. As my eventual ex-wife once said to me about 13 months after we had been dating, she said to me, when does it stop?
Yeah.
And I said, well, what do you mean? The sports, when does it stop? Once you realize that it's rolled into baseball season again. And said, well, it doesn't stop. They just kind of go from one.
Well, I will say that things have changed a little for me because this was the first WrestleMania I think ever that I didn't order.
Things aren't going to be the same because Ric Flair's retired now.
Well, do we say, I think you just come back and maybe come back during the playoffs and we can pretend to have a basketball conversation for 10 minutes and then go right to wrestling. Because that's something you've hid from your Celtics listeners is your profound wrestling passion and the fact that you have all these matches from MSG from the 80s on tape. I mean, you are into it.
There's a closet sports guy geek in all of us. We can pretend to be as cool as we want. It'll never work.
Hey, I have been open about my wrestling.
I know. That's what makes you successful because you're open about your. Not all of us embrace our geek bravado the way you have and made a.
I will say that the Benoit thing really really put a dent in my love for wrestling. It was really tough to bounce back from the steroid-induced murder of a wife and a mentally handicapped kid. I don't know. I haven't been able to bounce back.
I thought the same when the Owen Hart thing happened. I thought the same thing would happen to the business. Obviously, the Benoit thing was much worse. I met Chris and Nancy on a couple of occasions, and nothing will warp your perspective more than that, because it makes you think about all things that you don't think about behind the scenes, whether it be wrestling or football or whatever it is. You know, I think if people knew what was going on in an NFL locker room during a week to get guys ready to play, they wouldn't have the same. You know, there's a reason there's a curtain, and there's a reason that, you know, the line between sports and entertainment isn't as finitely drawn as we thought.
Do you think there would ever be a PED scandal in the NBA? It seems like it would be kind of like a logical league for it to happen.
Yeah, at some level, yet a lot of the things that, well, the fact that it is spread more into baseball when it is more about injury recuperation than performance enhancement. I've always believed that at a certain level. You know, I've talked to a lot of our guys in the league about it, and they really debate the benefits of a lot of that stuff for NBA players, where things that could theoretically help a baseball player aren't necessarily going to help.
Well, steroids would not help.
Right.
You know, it's
HGH is I think we're very, very early in the medical stage of HGH, and I wouldn't be surprised. You know, Woody Allen did that movie Sleeper, 30 years ago, where we later find out that all things are supposed to be bad for you are good. And I've had a lot of mixed information about HGH and what it might, 20 years from now, I wouldn't be surprised if HGH is completely banned and we know it to be the most dangerous thing ever, or if it's in every drugstore. You know, you can find that opinion at this very early stage from from wherever you want it. You can find different opinions about it. So,
well, it's one of the reasons why Rocky IV was such a visionary film, because not only was the precursor to the immediate end of the Cold War.
It shined a light on what could happen, and a great man, Apollo Creed, is dead.
Apollo Creed is dead?
Because of it.
And Rocky got brain damage from fighting in Russia with no money?
How was that? And by the way, how many times did he get knocked down in that fight, and it didn't get stopped?
At least 25.
He was knocked down like 30 times. It was one of those bare knuckles, like those black and white films, where the guy gets knocked down every 12 seconds and gets back up.
I think and one of the mailbags I did, one of the last ones I did.
Drago knocked him out so badly, when he got home, his son had aged 8 years.
I was going to say. You see, you stepped on my joke.
That's what you got to be fast around here. What am I, the night watchman around here? I mean.
Well, I was going to say, one of the last mailbags I ever did for my old website, you had mentioned that to me, and I think I used it in one of the questions about how Rocky's son legitimately aged 7 years over the course of that fight.
Didn't you interview Stallone? Didn't you have the opportunity to ask that question, and you didn't?
I didn't. Stallone, I had a chance to interview Stallone.
Speaking of HGH?
No, he's on my list with like Larry Bird and David Letterman and people, Bruce Springsteen, like people that from my heroes from my youth that I just would have trouble meeting.
Right.
I met Fred Lynn, and I was like a quivering mess. Like it was embarrassing. I turned into Chris Farley, so I try to keep my distance. Hey, we're out of time. Apparently,
next time I'll tell you about the dinner I had with Fred Lynn and the Iron Sheik.
That would be good. Yeah. 1 hour was not enough somehow.
It was.
Although maybe it was enough for everybody who was listening.
I guarantee you, probably 5-6 minutes was, but nevertheless, we had fun.
Sean Grande, we can look for what's the station? What's the call
WEEI
signal?
in Boston is the flagship station for our games. But people can go on NBA.com and hear them. Although I would caution you, because I obviously by my career choices I like being a cult success.
Well, I will say that
attention.
I hear so many crummy basketball announcers, and I swear to God, I swear on my kid's life, I would be saying this if we weren't friends, but I really do think you're one of the best play-by-play guys, and there's a rhythm to doing it that you have, and not a lot of people have. And that's what made it such a travesty when they just throw like Al Michaels or Bob Costas or these big broadcasters and just think they can do NBA games, because there's a specific way to do them, and only a few people know it. Would you agree?
Well, you're very sweet. That's a lot of man love. And,
thank you.
But those are Hall of Fame guys in my business, and they've earned that spot.
Good job. Good job deflecting.
Thank you.
All right, we'll have you back during the playoffs, and we'll talk some wrestling.
All right, my friend.
All right, thanks.
So I get to sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Pod Center at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.